Wouldn't it be great if you could find your shows all in one place?
Find my favorites.
Get Xfinity Stream Saver with Netflix, Apple TV Plus, and Peacock included for only $15 a month.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. Alongside EJ Smith, I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from AT&T Stadium, gearing up for the Eagles' Week 10 matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. EJ, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Olivia. You know, of all the stadiums that we frequent, you know, whether it's division rivals or obviously the Link, I think AT&T Stadium is right up there. You know, there's good press box food spread for the listeners who may be interested in that. I don't personally love the mac and cheese as much as some of the other people do, but I'm happy for them, I guess. So yeah, I'm excited for the show, excited for the game.
Well, we've got mac and cheese waiting for us after this. I think it's going to be even more enjoyable to talk with all of our viewers. We love seeing you guys every week, and we love having you be a part of our conversation. As always, you can head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. Leave us a comment, a question, whatever's on your mind. We want to hear from you, and we will answer some of those questions toward the end of our show today. We'll also be over there throughout the game, picking your brain, chatting with you over there. So we look forward to seeing you there as well. All right, EJ, lots to discuss, especially as it relates to the health of both of these teams. Let's start with the Eagles. Eagles are welcoming back a trio of players. One of those players, A.J. Brown, only missed half of the game last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, dealing with a knee injury. The good news is that he is good to go for today's game, and that also the Eagles will welcome back another threat in the receiving game, Dallas Goedert. He has missed the last 3 games dealing with a hamstring injury. He actually sustained that injury early in the game, week 5 against the Cleveland Browns, and he missed the majority of it. So it'll be good for the Eagles to get him back. In addition to that, we'll see the return of Darius Slay. He's been dealing with a groin injury. He missed this past week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then, yeah, we'll get all 3 of those guys back. So it's a pretty exciting prospect for the Eagles. But that said, in the absence of Dallas Goedert, we kind of saw the emergence of Grant Calcaterra. He was really strong over the last few weeks as he stepped in and filled in a big way for Dallas Goedert. Calcaterra had 13 receptions for 160 yards in the last 4 games. So he continues to blossom and grow as a receiver, which is a really exciting prospect for the Eagles, who have typically lacked a little bit of depth, I would say, at tight end with Goedert being the top guy. So I think it'll be a pretty big get to have an extra tight end there, tight end 2 essentially, for the Eagles as he continues to emerge and rise as a receiver. So let's also talk about who is out, and we'll get EJ back in here in a second. But we've got Jordan Mailata still on injured reserve, dealing with a hamstring injury. So Fred Johnson is expected to start in his place for a 4th straight game. It's been a really tough time, I would say, for Fred Johnson. He has faced a litany of really talented edge rushers over the last 4 weeks coming out of the bye week, and now he's going to face yet another tough one in Micah Parsons. Now, Micah Parsons has been out for the last 4 games as he deals with an ankle injury, and he is expected to return in today's game. We'll be getting the injury report here in just a little bit. But one thing about Parsons is that he tends to line up a little bit all over the formation. That said, you would think that the Cowboys are going to try to exploit that matchup, considering Lane Johnson is just a stalwart at right tackle and hasn't conceded many losses in that position, not only throughout his career, but particularly this season. So I'm eager to see exactly how Fred Johnson does in today's game, going up against, again, yet another talented edge rusher in Micah Parsons. So that'll be a key matchup to watch. And another, so as we've already mentioned, the Eagles have been dealing with a lot of different injuries. The Cowboys have really been decimated by injury, and going into this game, they're going to be down the key player on this team and quarterback Dak Prescott. Now he sustained a hamstring injury last week, and he may need season-ending surgery, which is a huge loss for this Cowboys offense. So now who are we going to see in his place? The answer there is Cooper Rush, who is essentially been a career backup here in Dallas, and he has only started 6 games throughout his career. He is 5-1-0 in those starts, so he has been able to keep this team afloat, which is quite impressive for a backup. And his last start was in 2022, so it's been a little while since he's gotten real starting game action. And what's also notable to note there is that the last time he started was when Kellen Moore, the Eagles offensive coordinator, was holding the same role here in Dallas. So he has a good deal of familiarity with Cooper Rush. When we spoke to him earlier in the week, he tried to kind of downplay the ties that he has in Dallas. He says he obviously knows Rush fairly well, but the ties that he has in Dallas here are not, he downplayed them in the sense that it's been now a couple years since he was in Dallas. He spent last season with quarterbacks coach Doug Nussmeier in Los Angeles, working for the Chargers, both in the same roles. So there has been a little bit of separation. However, you got some familiarity still with the quarterback. Vic Fangio said earlier in the week that he will occasionally pick Kellen Moore's brain about the quarterback. However, these are 2 division opponents. There's a lot of familiarity there. Obviously, I think Vic Fangio is capable of doing the work and has the knowledge there of the Cowboys himself. So I don't think that the Kellen Moore has served necessarily too much as a resource this week. But nonetheless, extremely a huge loss there for the Cowboys in not having Prescott. You're losing that athleticism, that arm strength that Prescott brings to the quarterback position. So that'll be a big advantage there for the Eagles. So while Prescott is not playing, we are expecting to see CeeDee Lamb in this game. He's been dealing with a shoulder injury. Defensive end Micah Parsons, as we've already mentioned, he has been dealing with an ankle injury for the last 4 games. He is expected to make his return as well. Right guard Zach Martin is in for the Cowboys. Defensive tackle Linval Joseph, who had been dealing with a back injury, he's playing. And then cornerback Kalen Carson, who has been dealing with a shoulder injury, he is also expected to play as well, and he is likely to start, given the fact that Deron Bland is not playing in today's game. So extremely, again, there's been a lot of attrition there for the Eagles, and I think it's for the Cowboys, and I think it's going to be a big matchup advantage for the Eagles in this game because of just the fact that they have the Cowboys are dealing with so many injuries on both sides of the ball. It's quite staggering. Now, it's also important to note as we transition to our latest headline segment here, the fact that the Eagles haven't won a game at AT&T Stadium since 2017. It's been quite some time. I'm sure as Eagles fans know, as they've been watching this team on their road trips here in Arlington, Texas, the Eagles have not had a lot of success. This is a tough place for them to play. However, one might imagine that this is actually the best shot that the Eagles have had in quite a long time to win this game, just because of how much attrition is on the other side there for the Cowboys, but also because the Eagles have been red hot coming out of the bye week, both on offense and on defense. So it's been a really good season for them so far. Conversely, for the Cowboys, they have really struggled, particularly on defense. And as we bring in Jeff McLean here, he's going to talk a little bit about this as well with me. I mean, the Cowboys, Jeff, have been really terrible, I think it's safe to say, on defense. They're 31st in points allowed, 26th in yards against. When you look at the injuries both for the Cowboys and the fact that the Eagles have been playing so well, is this an easy game for the Eagles to win, or could you see this being a bit of a trap game?
I mean, I could see both happening. I don't, I'm not 100% convinced that this team is maybe as good as it's played the last 4 weeks. I mean, the competition has played a role in that. But I agree with you on the Cowboys. That, what you see on tape, when you look at the numbers, and then when you talk to the local reporters here, which I've done now since I've been here, they're all predicting an Eagles blowout win. So they're pretty down on this defense in particular. I just talked to one reporter, Clarence Hill, a longtime Cowboys reporter, and he was just saying how I think the only way the Eagles can lose this game is if Hurts turns the ball over. Otherwise, he's like, I don't know how they can cover all of their skill position guys. AJ's back and he's fine, it seems, with the knee. Devontae has a hamstring, but he says he's good to go. Saquon Barkley, as we all know, is maybe the best player on this team through 8 games. So it's going to be hard. And then Dallas Goedert comes back. So it's just like those are 4 top tier guys. And with the Cowboys down, there's no Deron Bland. There's no DeMarcus Lawrence. I know that Micah Parsons is coming back, and he'll be a handful for Fred Johnson, who has done pretty solid work in place of Jordan Mailata, and they're probably going to help him. But 1-on-1, that is a definite mismatch. So maybe Micah can force a turnover in some way. Diggs, they're I guess their top cornerback. If you're talking without Bland, he's gotten a lot of interceptions over his career. He loves to jump routes. I imagine the Eagles are going to try and double move him a few times, maybe set him up for one over the top. Javon Diggs. Sorry, forgot his first name for a second. EJ's back.
It's a miracle.
Yeah, sorry. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, I agree with you that this is a game that they finally have a chance to end the 6-game slide here in Dallas and pull out a victory.
Thank you, Jeff, for jumping in for us. We'll see you in a little bit when you come back to do predictions and give your matchup to watch a little bit later. EJ, good to see you again. I just want to mention
good to be
something.
back. Maybe it was the mac and cheese gods. They were upset with me, so they torpedoed my internet. But yeah, thank you for holding it down.
You got to watch what you say about that mac and cheese. It's very popular among many of the reporters here in the press box. One thing I just wanted to add too is that Trayvon Diggs is active for today's game. He was dealing with both a calf injury and an illness throughout the week this week, so he is active and they're clear-cut top cornerback in today's game, and we'll get into the matchup in a little bit. But let's actually start by talking about the fact that CeeDee Lamb, who's been dealing with a shoulder injury, is playing today, and he is their clear-cut biggest threat on that Cowboys offense. He leads the team with 660 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns on 53 receptions. If you think back to last year when the Cowboys came in Philly, he had one of his most dynamic, explosive performances of the season, racking up 191 yards on just 11 receptions. And if you think about exactly how the Cowboys like to use CeeDee Lamb, they like to move him around. He lines up in the slot. He lines up outside. Last year, the Eagles really didn't have a great answer to CeeDee Lamb in the slot. In that particular game in Philly, when the Cowboys came and visited, the Eagles were relying heavily on Eli Ricks, an undrafted rookie who really hadn't played in the slot much, to start to play there and to take a lot of reps against Lamb. Sidney Brown and Kevin Byard also chipped in a little bit, the 2 safeties. This time around, though, the Eagles have a lot of new faces in this secondary, especially Cooper DeJean starting now in the slot. How much better equipped do you feel like the Eagles are this time around in facing Lamb? All right, we've lost EJ again, so we'll bring him back in a moment, and we'll bring Jeff McLean back in a second. But yes, Jeff, as EJ had started to mention, he was talking a little bit about Cooper DeJean coming in and the fact that the secondary is a lot better equipped to face CeeDee Lamb, especially particularly when he lines up in the slot. How do you feel about this Eagles secondary going into this game, knowing they're going to be facing one of the top receivers in the league in CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the personnel's been better on the back end. You brought in 2 rookies that have been able to step in and play from day one. Cooper took a little while because of the injury that he suffered, the hamstring injury he suffered during training camp. But he's upgraded the slot position over Avonte Maddox. Quinyon Mitchell has upgraded the outside cornerback spot with James Bradbury injured, but not that he was likely to be back at cornerback this year. But you have 2 upgrades there specifically. And Darius Slay, I know for some reason a lot of people in Philadelphia are down on Darius, but I still think that when he's out there, he's one of the better cornerbacks in the league. It's just a tough position to play, and you're going to get burned every now and then. But, CeeDee, I just don't see there's any way that Vic Fangio doesn't bracket coverage towards him. He's done this all season against top receivers. He did it last week against Brian Thomas, and it worked effectively. He did it a few weeks ago against Jamar Chase and the Bengals. He was held to like 5.6 yards per catch. So, I mean, Vic knows what he's doing in terms of the coverages. And I think, not all game doubling CeeDee Lamb, but certainly in select spots, you're going to see that. Because if you look at the rest of this Cowboys offense, beyond just the fact that you have the backup Cooper Rush playing a quarterback, it just doesn't really strike fear, I think, in this Eagles defense. Cavante Turpin's now been bumped up to the slot. Jalen Tolbert's the number 2 outside guy. Jake Ferguson's a good tight end. I mean, he may cause the Eagles some trouble. There's specifically safety CJ Gardner-Johnson or Reed Blankenship. And the running game just isn't what it used to be here in Dallas. Rico Tattle is a fine running back, but the offensive line is just not what it used to be. They have some issues up front. There's still talent there. You still have Zach Martin, could eventually be a Hall of Famer. Tyler Smith is one of the better left guards in the NFL, but something's just missing in this offense. And I think like we spoke about on the defensive side of the ball, this Mike McCarthy West Coast offense, it's just kind of too predictable. And I think that's been the issue for this offense to some extent, beyond the personnel issues that they've had and the fact that they haven't been able to play complementary football because their defense is so lacking.
Let's flip it over to the other side now. So as we already discussed, the Cowboys are extremely limited right now at cornerback. Obviously, Diggs is playing. Deron Bland is out for today's game. But opposite Diggs, fifth-round rookie Kalen Carson is expected to make just his fifth start of his career at outside cornerback today. He is coming off of arguably the worst game that he has had of this season in coverage last week against the Falcons. He allowed 8 receptions for 97 yards on 8 targets. Now, if you look at what the Eagles have conversely on offense, I mean, this is a receiving core that is now back to full health with Goddard coming back into the lineup. A.J. Brown recovered now from a knee injury. When you look at just the threat that the Eagles have in the receiving game and in the running game, both between Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, how do you think the Cowboys may try to commit their resources on defense towards stopping either of them?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the tough task for them, and that's what we've seen from this Eagles offense in terms of the balance. It's been hard for teams to pick which area to try and focus their attention on in terms of stopping them. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Cowboys, who have not done a good job of stopping the run, but I think their only chance is to kind of stack the box and keep Barkley, try and keep him in check and say, hey, Jalen Hurts, you have to go beat us throwing the ball. Problem with that is, as you mentioned, they're just not as good on the back end. They haven't been able to generate much of a pass rush. The Eagles have matchup advantages all over the field with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and Saquon out of the backfield. So that's where I think if the Cowboys are going to have any chance in this game, they have to put the Eagles in long passing situations on third down, and they have to give their line some time to get to Jalen via whatever way it may be. Mike Zimmer, he's known for that double mug A gap blitz. He hasn't been able to use that as much because I think he's been afraid of stealing from the back end because they don't have a lot of depth there and they're just not as strong. But if they can rattle Jalen, who has shown at times this season that when he sees an opposing jersey, he drops his eyes and he starts to panic a little bit. But if he's got the time that he's had over these last few weeks, it could be lights out for Dallas.
Mm-hmm. All right, fair point there, Jeff. Thank you once again for joining us. We can bring EJ back if he is ready to go. Good to see you again. We'll give this another go. We're happy to have you back for our fan zone, the best zone, my favorite personal zone. And we'll start with this question here from Retired at 58, good friend of the show and of our Gameday Central chat. They say Cowboys have the Eagles number in Dallas for some reason. Doesn't matter how bad the Cowboys are. The Eagles are going to lose a close one. They hope that they are wrong. We'll get into our predictions later in the show. But EJ, I think one of the perceived advantages that maybe the Eagles have is the fact that they have a clear-cut connection to the Cowboys, someone who knows this Cowboys team well in Kellen Moore. He has been on the other end of this rivalry for many years. For the first time now, he gets to be on the Eagles' end. As I already mentioned at the top of our show, he signed with the Cowboys practice squad in 2015, eventually retired as a player and then transitioned into a coaching role as a quarterback's coach in 2018. And then the following year, he was promoted to offensive coordinator, a post that he held until 2022. So he's got a lot of familiarity with this team, with Mike McCarthy. On the flip side, Mike McCarthy has a lot of familiarity with Kellen Moore too. How do you see this relationship, this connection that Kellen Moore has in Dallas potentially affecting this game either for the better for the Eagles or for the worse?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that it's kind of one of those things where it almost cancels it's each other out because they are so familiar with each other where, Mike McCarthy knows Kellen Moore's tendencies when it comes to play calling, kind of the things that he likes to get to and the kind of the approach that he has to the game. So I definitely think that familiarity, like I said, can kind of cancel each other out. But I do think that there is something to it. I feel like, these types of matchups where you're familiar with the person, maybe there's a little bit more extra, maybe you do like spend that a little extra time trying to figure out ways to kind of take advantage. It's kind of that cat and mouse game where what his tendencies might be. So you have to have tendency breakers. So I think it'll be an interesting thing to watch. Like I said, that cat and mouse game between Mike McCarthy and Kellen Moore.
Absolutely. Thank you, Retired at 58. We look forward to seeing you in the Gameday Central chat in just a bit. Let's take this question here from Gary Yard. They say that they hope for the Eagles pass rush, that with more playing time and game experience, that Nolan Smith and Moro Ajama keep improving. And we also saw Howie Roseman kind of take a similar approach or have a similar mindset just by not making any moves at the trade deadline. Didn't ship a player off, didn't acquire a player. I think one of the highly speculated position groups that Roseman may look to either alter in some capacity, bring a guy in, get rid of a guy, would have been that edge rusher core. Instead, it stays intact. And Nick Sirianni reiterated his confidence in that group earlier in the week, saying that maybe even someone like Jalix Hunt could potentially have a bigger role in this defense into the second half of the season. He has not. I think he's had only 17 snaps on defense through 3 games. He's only been active for, I want to say, 6 or 7 games too. So haven't gotten to see a whole lot of them. That said, the pass rush has been steadily improving coming out of the bye week. That group has, well, not just them, but the Eagles, in terms of getting after the quarterback, they've had 16 sacks in the last 4 games. A big chunk of them has come from that edge rusher group. A big substantial chunk of them came against the Giants when the Eagles were able to take down either Daniel Jones or Drew Lock a total of 8 times in that game. Do you feel like it was a good bet to bet on some of those young edge rushers and even an Ajomo in the middle of the Eagles defensive line there to take bigger steps in their careers as the pass rush continues to develop? Or would you have liked to have seen Howie Roseman acquire an edge rusher at the trade deadline? And we have lost EJ once again, so hopefully we will be able to bring him back momentarily. I will say personally, I think that it was a good move to let Howie Roseman just kind of stand pat and not make any big acquisitions. I suppose I should say that had there been a big name edge rusher available for the Eagles to acquire, I think that may have been a solid option for them. But I don't think that Myles Garrett, for example, from the Browns, he wasn't moved and he wasn't ultimately available. Max Crosby with the Raiders, not available. So other than that, you're looking at kind of replacement level guys. Ultimately, Zadarius Smith gets sent to the Detroit Lions from the Cleveland Browns. Perhaps he would have been a decent veteran pickup, but ultimately I think it would have made more sense, if anything, to get a guy with some term, with some upside. Zadarius Smith is getting older in his career. So I ultimately think that it made sense for Roseman to just commit to the guys that are there, to commit to the young guys that are there. Nolan Smith has been coming on, as we mentioned. Jalix Hunt is waiting in the wings right now too. So be interested to see if we start to see a little bit more of him as this season progresses. I talked to Hunt earlier in the week just about how he's been feeling in practice and starting to come along a little bit. And a lot of the offensive tackles that I spoke really highly of his development and how he has been able to show a lot in these practices. He's been developing a variety of moves. It hasn't just been a couple things that he has focused on. He's really trying to come along in his power rushes too. So a lot of players spoke highly of him, and I'm curious to see if he'll start to take on a little bit of a bigger role soon. All right, we will transition into our Inquirer player picks, and I guess I'll start with mine personally, as I think one of the players I am most intrigued to watch in today's game is Saquon Barkley. Now, obviously, Barkley makes things interesting every single week. He has been really, I think, just as someone who enjoys watching football, he has been a real special player to watch this past week in particular, whether he was rushing for touchdowns, catching touchdowns, or hurdling players backwards. There was a lot of exciting play from Saquon Barkley that all the Eagles fans got to enjoy, that football fans got to enjoy as well. And the reason I'm so interested in how he performs in today's game is just because, as Jeff mentioned earlier in our show, the Cowboys have been particularly brutal against the run this year, and they have allowed opposing running backs to rack up more yards than expected on 38% of opponents' rushes this season, which is the second highest rate in the NFL according to NFL Next Gen Stats. Saquon Barkley has been also one of the best running backs at generating rushing yards over expected. He's collected 263 rushing yards over expected, which is the second most in the NFL this year. So I think that's going to be a key matchup that the Eagles can look to exploit in today's game. Whether or not that is going to be the focal point of the game plan, we will find out, because there's a chance that the Eagles want to try to beat the Cowboys through the air too. And in my opinion, I think there's going to have to be a balance of both of those things. So we'll see exactly how that one goes. All right, let's get into our predictions, and we'll bring in Jeff for that right now. Jeff, before I want you to look into your crystal ball and to figure out the score for today's game, what matchup are you most intrigued by in today's game?
Well, I think one of the, I wouldn't say it's necessarily under the radar, because Josh Sweat is a good defensive end. He's played very well this season, but I think he has a decided advantage over the rookie Tyler Guyton, at left tackle. He's the Cowboys' first round pick. They threw him out there right away, and they knew that it was going to take some time for him to get adjusted to playing in the NFL and against top edge rushers. But he's struggled in pass protection. He's not bad in terms of his run blocking, but against in the pass rush, he's allowed, I think it was like 15 pressures already, 4 of them sacks. And Josh Sweat has really been coming on of late. And I think this is an area that the Cowboys got to be concerned about. Cooper Rush, Josh Sweat coming off his blind side. I guess I can go ahead and just predict it. I think that you could see Sweat get maybe 1 or 2 sacks in this game. I recall just a couple of years ago, I think it was Sweat that had the pick 6 that he took in for a touchdown in a game the Eagles would eventually lose. Sweat's had, there was some question about whether he was going to return this offseason. The Eagles were up in the air. He restructured his contract to make it more team friendly, so he's got 1 year left in the deal. But he's been playing well, and that is in spite of not really having an Hassan Reddick caliber guy on the other side. Bryce Huff, as we've talked about plenty of times, hasn't really been playing up to the contract that he signed in the offseason. Nolan Smith is developing and getting a little better. Brandon Graham, when he's out there, obviously can make plays, although he's more so been backing up Sweat. But Sweat's done his job. He's I think he'll struggle against the top tackles in this league, but in this game, I think Sweat's got quite the edge, and I think you'll see a couple sacks from him today, maybe at least 1.
Josh Sweat has 5 sacks in his last 5 games. So, we'll see if he's able to notch another one and make it at least 6 in his last 6. Jeff, what is your final score for today's game?
Yeah, I'm going with the Eagles. Not much of a surprise. It's just tough to see the Cowboys with a backup quarterback pulling this out, considering all the problems that they have on the defensive side of the ball, lacking in offensive imagination in terms of the scheme. Rush is no stiff. I mean, if we recall 2 years ago, he had won 4 games heading into a matchup with the Eagles at the Link that the Eagles won, but they kind of had to scrape by that team, even though Rush had thrown three interceptions. But he's not Dak Prescott, and I just think that as long as Jalen Hurts protects the ball, doesn't turn the ball over, the Eagles stick with this offensive game, this offensive structure that emphasizes running the ball, getting Saquon Barkley going on the ground, and also with Kenny Gainwell, I'm watching now, warm up. I think it's a game that they should be able to win. That being said, I'm not ruling out the possibility of an upset, but my final score is going to be Eagles 30-20.
All right, I've got a little bit slightly closer of a matchup, not that much closer, but 27-20 Eagles in today's game. I think on paper, the Eagles have the clear matchup advantage in so many areas on both sides of the ball. The fact that they're not facing Dak Prescott, even though the Cowboys have been struggling for the majority of the season, I think is a really big break for this team. Cooper Rush just does not have the same talents as a passer that Prescott boasts, and the fact that he isn't going to be playing this game, I think, is a real big advantage for the Eagles. And as we've already mentioned over and over again, the fact that the Eagles have so many weapons on offense going up against a Cowboys defense that has just been I think, reeling this year. They have not looked good. I think the Eagles have a number of ways that they can beat them, whether it's on the ground, through the air, and ways that they can kind of marry those two areas of their game too, and diving into the play action game a little bit more, getting the run game going to set that up. So I'm eager to see exactly how this all shakes out. But for the first time in 2017, since 2017, I am saying that the Eagles are going to get a win here in Arlington, Texas. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us for Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here. As a reminder, you can head on over to Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. If you're not there already, leave us some comments and questions throughout the game. I'll be over there answering them and chatting with all of you. So we look forward to seeing you over there.
And please keep up with more Eagles coverage on my podcast, Uncovering the Birds. New episodes released every week. Listen to wherever you get your podcasts, or go to Inquirer.com/podcast.
Again, that's all for today, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into Gameday Central.